West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy with Chef Justice Putnam. Netrootsradio.com.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. À fleurs sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, qu'il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël.
Today, for the first time, Donald Trump took the stand in one of his many trials. Not the two federal trials, not the Georgia racketeering trial, not the hush money trial, the civil fraud trial underway in Manhattan right now. Trump's been attending every day, doesn't apparently have anything better to do, and he was summoned to the witness stand by the judge himself to answer for a potential violation of a gag order the judge imposed 3 weeks ago. That gag order came after Trump posted a photo to social media of the court's clerk attacking her. And the gag order banned Trump from, reasonably I'd say, quote, posting or speaking publicly about the judge's staff. Well, this morning, Trump went to the cameras outside the courtroom and he said this.
If we had a jury, it would have been fair, at least, even if it was a somewhat negative jury, because no negative jury would vote against me. But this judge will, because this judge is a very partisan judge, with a person who's very partisan sitting alongside of him, perhaps even much more partisan than he is.
He said the judges with a partisan person sitting alongside him. The judge took issue with that comment, summoned Trump to the witness stand to answer for it. He asked him, quote, to whom were you referring when you said the person sitting alongside of him? You and Cohn, Trump said. The judge asked, are you sure you didn't mean the person on the other side of me, my principal law clerk? Yes, I am sure. Later, the judge asked Trump, quote, don't you always refer to Michael Cohen as Michael Cohen? No, Trump said. His attorneys jumped in to help him out, with Chris Kise insisting many things even worse than that. Alina Habba adding, quote, yes, Your Honor, I can confirm that much worse. The judge then made his decision, and I quote the judge here, as the trier of fact, I find the witness is not credible that he was referring to my law clerk, who is principal law clerk, who is sitting much closer to me, who doesn't have a barrier, whom I believe has been accused by the defendant of being partisan or Democrat or partisan Democrat. I hereby fine you $10,000, which is on the low side, to be paid within 30 days to the lawyer's fund for client protection. Now, about 45 minutes after that, the judge denied a motion by Trump's lawyer. And to the apparent surprise of his attorneys, Trump stormed out of the courtroom with Secret Service chasing behind. Irate and red-faced, he stopped only to talk to the scrambling cameras outside the courtroom.
The witness just admitted that we won the trial, and the judge should end this trial immediately. Thank you.
The witness admitted no such thing. Joining me now are two people who were in the courtroom for that incredible scene in different roles. Former federal prosecutor Danya Perry, who represents Michael Cohen, and MSNBC legal analyst Lisa Rubin. I feel like in the times that I've reported from court, I have occasionally witnessed dramatic scenes, but largely it's actually been pretty boring and rote and not like television. Today was wild.
Today, as Danya and I were discussing before we came on set with you, was a little bit like watching Legally Blonde. For our viewers who know this movie well, there's a moment at the end of the movie where a witness on the stand breaks down, admits to a crime, and then the judge essentially rules the trial over because Elle Woods' client is not guilty. And that is exactly what Cliff Robert, who represents the Trump sons, expected to happen today. He moved for what's called a directed verdict. That's asking the judge basically truncate the trial, end it now, and fine for us. And he didn't do that. But that's what they expected to happen. And they honestly seemed surprised. And Trump seemed just downright angry that that's not what happened. It was definitely like television or a film.
So your client, was he in the room today as well? He was. He started the day on the stand, right?
He was on the stand almost the entire day, other than for the portion of the day where the judge found Mr. Trump not credible.
Right. So what happens is Trump comes out and says that thing, right? Which, I don't know, you guys were in the room and sort of caught the vibe. It seems to me obvious he was talking about the judge's clerk, who he has a fixation on, who the lawyers apparently have a little bit of fixation on. Is that a fair reading? Do you think there's any context clues he was actually talking about your client, Michael Cohen?
Well, when he wants to talk about Michael Cohen, he says Michael Cohen.
Yeah.
In fact, he did in a True Social post last evening. He did in front of the cameras today. So he certainly knows how to direct his vitriol in Mr. Cohen's general direction. So I certainly think the judge had ample support for his credibility determination.
You know, without the rest of the quote, it's a little bit arguable. You could even be generous to Trump and say it's ambiguous. But there was a portion of that quote that we didn't have an opportunity to play on air where he returns to talking about Michael Cohen. And that, to me, makes it even more clear that at the very beginning, he is indeed talking about the judge's principal law clerk, because then he changes subjects to talk about Michael Cohen.
And just, again, to be clear here, like, just you guys putting on your, like, experience in a courtroom. I mean, going after a judge's clerk, posting them on social media when you are a person who, when you draw attention to people, often they will have security concerns. Posting a picture, being ordered by the judge to take it down, not taking down one of them, getting a fine for that, and then coming out and in your veiled and clever way talking about that. I mean, that's totally out of bounds, right?
Totally out.
I mean, I'm like, how is this? And it just seems like one of these things where, from the beginning this started, this is a guy who's got one mode. Test, 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 test. And now we're seeing it in every different venue with Judge Chutkan, right? Judge Chutkan gives him a gag order. Yep. Then she temporarily lifts the gag order pending an appeal. And he goes on Truth Social and he's not violating it, the gag order stayed. The failing New York Times story leaked by deranged Jack Smith, blah, blah, blah. Goes after a guy who might be a witness. Like, exactly
Kyle Chaney of Politico said it right this morning. He said it was like a checklist of how to violate the gag order. You know, Chris, I'd also point out to you, though, that even if the gag order is stayed, he still has conditions of release that include not violating any state, federal, or local statutes. There is a witness tampering statute, 18 U.S.C. 1512. I encourage our viewers to look it up. It's arguable that he violated that even if that federal gag order is stayed. But you're right. He's trying to test at every front. And sometimes he might not even be trying. I really do think he has a problem with impulse control and certainly has a problem with listening to his lawyers.
So I should note, in the same way that there's like this colorable claim it was about Michael Cohen, in this case, the Truth Social post was about the documents case, right? Which is not Tanya Chutkan's case. Now, at the same time, all this drama is happening, right? Trump gets pulled up onto the witness stand to testify in his own defense by the judge about whether he's going to find him in violation. Your client is in the room and he gets a subpoena today?
Last night.
Sure. About
while he's
on
what? Cross-examination in the Manhattan District Attorney's criminal case. Trump's lawyers in that case, and there's some overlap, and they were in the courtroom today, issued a subpoena to him. And I don't want to get into it because I haven't had time yet to formulate my legal strategy. But it
this
certainly
was a subpoena to testify in that case?
For documents.
For documents.
Yeah, documents that, clearly it has the stink of witness intimidation once again, at least to me.
After all of this, I mean, there's this judge has tried hard to keep this trial going, right? And there's been back and forth about the different arguments that are made. Where is the trial now in terms of its arc?
There are about 27 witnesses that the New York Attorney General intends to put on. I'd have to go back to the list to see where we are. I don't think we're halfway through that yet.
Wow.
Tomorrow, we're expecting testimony from Sherry Dillon, who is the Morgan Lewis partner who was principally in charge of Trump's legal tax work. She's a person known to us because she was at that infamous press conference with the huge stacks of paper.
Yes.
Yeah, see, I say that to someone who's a cable news host. And they're, oh, Sherry Dillon, we know her.
I know that sound. We play that.
But I think we'll be here for a few more weeks. And certainly they are trying to delay and stall at every turn. You saw that yesterday they made a huge issue out of a COVID outbreak on the Attorney General's side, trying to use that to delay trial a day further. And yet nobody on the Trump side of the courtroom was wearing a mask, which Judge Engoron noted to them were widely available and they were free to wear.
It is Thursday, the 26th of October of 2023, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam. Gunner the English Bulldog is our snoozing sous chef. Precious, the little Yorkie, is our door girl, and she will be seating you directly for our especially special daily special, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. A little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. Okay, well, speaking of spicy, I guess we're back to normal. Got the mass shootings, or I guess this one's called a spree. He's on a killing spree, shooting mass amounts of people in the process. So I'm just got technicalities here, and apparently the suspect is only a person of interest. Now, I did put myself in a break, and then when I go to the break, I may look and find out that they've upgraded because they're supposed to have a news conference. And like I said, I'm in a bubble. I just have to be able to do this. But during the break, when I turn around and check out the Cryons, they may have upgraded him from person of interest to suspect. Now, it has been widely reported that the guy is like off his rocker. He is a Looney Tune. And the first thing that I thought of was he must be white. And not only that, a MAGA-loon. And it's turning out that I might be correct. I mentioned that last night. And I said, mark my word, he's a military shooting instructor with mental issues. Oh, you mean he's a MAGA-loon? Okay. Retweets Don Jr. on the reg. Loves Jordan Peterson. Thinks there are transvestites out there carrying guns are going to shoot people who aren't trans. What a COVID denier. Okay. So like I said, a MAGA-loon. And they keep saying he's deeply disturbed, but they won't say what he's disturbed by. He's hearing voices in his head, they say. And my question is, do the voices in his head come from Fox News? And it looks like I'm right. Because anybody else who was not of this guy's demographic, shall we say, would be put into the lane of, well, he hates America. Okay. We're going to find out. And they're going to try to bury the fact that, Here's another example of the MAGAs going off. I knock on wood, okay? But you're not really seeing Antifa going off on a crazy thing like that, all right? I'm just saying. Because you know what Antifa is about? To stop this BS from happening. I mean, give me a break. Oh, man. All right. So we got the Christo-fascist in the speakership now. I like that. They say he's like, he puts on the little Clark Kent look. Very polite. Is he? Says we live in a biblical republic. Hey, F you, pal. I was raised in the Catholic religion. I went to Catholic school. I excelled. I was an altar boy. I even spent time at a seminary, ever so briefly, mind you. And I got to tell you, what I know is that the reason the founders, and especially in Jefferson's letter to the Danbury Baptist. I know no one teaches that anymore. Why would they? There is a separation between church and state. Excuse me. We do not live in a biblical republic. Even Jefferson, you look at the Jefferson Bible, and he takes all references of Jesus out of the Bible. Where would old Thomas be in today's new a-go-go society, huh? Yeah, he'd be out because he didn't pass the religious test that the founders implored we, the people, to never have. And here we are. We got Christo-fascists taking a knee in the well of the house and praying in their weird, outstretched hand, like they got some sort of power coming out of their hands, or they're receiving the power of God in their hands. It looks like a stiff arm salute to something, and I don't like it. And I never have. I like to think that, you don't have to go through the I don't know, it was rather a rigorous education in Catholic school, I have to say. Taught us how to be critical thinkers to the point that you critically thought about what the hell the materialist church had been doing all these centuries. Little about God and a lot about acquiring material. Can't take it to heaven. I promise you. It doesn't go through the transporter, all right? Organic beings with a supposed soul. That gets through the transporter. Jewels, baubles, mansions. Nope. Can't get them through. They might be able to be discorporated, but they just can't put them back together. No room in heaven for that. And if only people understood, maybe we wouldn't be doing what we're doing. I doubt it. Because for all this talk about peace, love, and understanding, you look at the universe and it seems like a chaotic, violent mess. Go to an insect colony, okay? What is the prime directive there? Eat or be eaten. I bet that's what it is. Okay. And it's pheromones that keeps them all together. That's right. Something smells to high heaven and we're going to react. Oh, boy. It's tough being a human, isn't it? Mm-hmm. If only we would stop killing each other. But apparently, nope, gotta do it. Eat or be eaten. Lovely. All right. So, they're having a hard time, and people are hard time getting this fellow, Robert Card, is that his name? Card. And, he's gone to ground, apparently. Well, I don't know, maybe he's offed himself. Who knows? All the analysts said is, 50-50 that is these two things, and then right after that they say it's 50-50 with these other two things. I'm all like, which is it? That sounds like a quarter to a quarter. I don't know. Quarter to a quarter. Then they parsed it down to an eighth and an eighth. Could be these 8 things. None of them are good. So, people are complaining or wondering how it is that this fellow who just mere months ago was in they say a mental asylum, but he was in a facility. He'd been hearing voices. I'm telling you, it's from Fox News, okay? Or some derivative thereof. And how was it that he was able to acquire these guns? He had them. 40-some years old. He's 40 years old. I got to tell you, he looks a little old, too, for 40. Jeez. Because to me, people who are 40 are like kids, and this doesn't look like a kid anymore. No, a little bit more grizzled. I did see a picture where he's actually clean-shaven, and he looks like, yep. Mass shooter. Spree killer. Yeah, I like the idea of spree killer. That was the other, giveaway to me. A white magaloon. Not a mass shooter. I know it's cop speak for legal BS, but give me a break. And I wish the media would start saying, it's not hard to figure out what is on this guy's social media accounts. They even cited it, but they won't cite the fact of, what they found, what has been found. And it took me a while to actually accept that what I was seeing was what I was seeing, because what I was seeing was first on Twitter. It's not X, Twitter. And you can't trust that place anymore. People in Lewiston were saying that they used to be able to go to Twitter and, if there was sirens going off down the street, there would be people there that they followed or whatever and say, oh, yeah, it's all cool. Just going after somebody who got hit by a deer. You don't hit deer in Maine, they hit you. Okay, and it's not nice. Moose, too. Get hit by a moose, you don't like it. No one hits those things. They get hit by them. And the cops have to go and pick up the pieces. Yeah, got another deer and moose collision again. Poor people. Let's take them to the hospital. That's why the trauma clinics are pretty good. From all the people getting hit by deer and moose in Maine. I don't know. So he had the guns. It still would be nice so that, keep that kind of stuff in an armory. Wouldn't that be nice? But I guess since we live in a biblical republic, gotta have a gun. All right, what do we have in store for you here as we begin this salon that we call West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? The Oregon Supreme Court will decide if Republican state senators who carried out a record-breaking walkout during this year's legislative session can run for re-election. Because we, the voters, said if you do that, you can't run for re-election. And now the Supreme Court has to find out if we can uphold the law. Be nice. Scholastic Inc. will drop the highly criticized policy that makes it easier for school fairs to exclude diverse books. Yeah. Pushing back. You punch the Nazis. You don't let the Nazis tell Scholastic what to do. And the White House wants $56 billion from Congress for disaster relief, child care, and high-speed internet. Let's see what happens now with that. We have a biblical republic in the House. A biblical republic in the House. After the break, we move to the chef's table where the World Bank approved a $1 billion loan to help black out hit South Africa's energy sector. Yeah, apparently vast swaths of South Africa has been blacked out for a couple of months. That's not good. Oh, and Slovakia's president is ready to swear in a new cabinet after a coalition partner agreed to replace a climate change denying ministry nominee. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. page at netrootsradio.com. To the right of the page is the chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. Thank you, Kelly. Across the page from that chat room link that's near the bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com is the link to our Patreon page. And if you could become a recurring Patreon of Netroots Radio, that would be really nice. It really would. And if you could help us, that would be even nicer. So thank you. And thank you to those of you who have. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, and I think Blue Sky, we got the invite, you can do so by going to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of those. Thank you, Tom. Follow me on Twitter, Mastodon, Spoutable, Blue Sky, Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, etc., at Justice Putnam. I post the show notes and links diary on Daily Co's 10 minutes before showtime. I just put it in queue, and it just comes up. I say, put it in 10 minutes before, and the robot or whatever it is puts it there. And in those show notes and links diaries, you'll be able to find the links to the actual reportage in which we draw such great inspiration from in this salon that we affectionately know as West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. You can also follow the show on Twitter. It will never be X, by going to @CookbookWest. And please do pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes, really wherever podcasts can be found. All right. Just won't find them on Stitcher, because Stitcher isn't there anymore. And you know why. All righty. This first offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy is by staff at the domestic desk of the Associated Press. The Oregon Supreme Court will decide whether Republican state senators who carried out a record-setting GOP walkout during the legislative session this year can run for re-election. The decision, announced on Tuesday, means the lawmakers should have clarity before the March 12 deadline to file for office. The senators from the minority party are challenging a 2022 voter-approved constitutional amendment that bars state lawmakers from re-election after having 10 or more unexcused absences. Oregon voters overwhelmingly approved the ballot measure that created the amendment following Republican walkouts in the legislature in 2019, 2020, and 2021. And now they're complaining because they walked out again in 2022 after we said, you can't do that anymore. They don't care about we, the voters. Back to the article at hand. In an official explanatory statement, as well as in promotional materials and news coverage, the measure was touted as prohibiting lawmakers who stay away in order to block legislative action from seeking re-election. That's the meaning the state elections officials have chosen to adopt. Earlier this year, Secretary of State LaVon Griffin-Velarde announced that 10 senators would be prohibited from seeking re-election. 9 Oregon Republicans and an independent clocked at least 10 absences during this year's legislative session in order to block Democratic bills related to abortion, transgender health care, and guns. The walkout prevented a quorum, holding up bills in the Democratic-led Senate for 6 weeks. 5 of those senators have objected. In a legal challenge to Griffin-Velarde's ruling, they argue that the way the amendment is written means they can seek another term. The constitutional amendment says a lawmaker is not allowed to run for the term following the election after the member's current term is completed. Since a senator's term ends in January, while elections are held the previous November, they argue the penalty doesn't take effect immediately, but instead after they've served another term. Now that is Republican math. Associated Press brings us this next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. Scholastic Inc. will end a widely criticized policy that made it easier for school book fairs not to sell works with racial disability and LGBTQ plus themes. The children's publisher angered many authors and educators this fall when it created a separate package of dozens of books labeled Share Every Story, Celebrate Every Voice, and gave schools the option on whether to include them in fairs. Poet Amanda Gorman, whose Change Sings was among the titles in Share Every Story, had said in an Instagram video that Scholastic's decision felt like a betrayal. Scholastic had said the policy, which will remain in place for the rest of the year, was a response to the proliferation and restrictions passed by states around the country. The publisher has not settled on a strategy for 2024. This fall, we made changes in our elementary school fairs out of concern for our book fair hosts. In doing this, we offered a collection of books to supplement the diverse collection of titles already available at the Scholastic Book Fair. We understand now that the separate nature of the collection has caused confusion and feelings of exclusion, according to a Scholastic statement issued yesterday, Wednesday. We are working across Scholastic to find a better way. The Share Every Story, Celebrate Every Voice collection will not be offered for our next season in January, as we consider how to make our book fairs available to all kids. We will keep in mind the needs of our educators facing local content restrictions and the children we serve. Well, that's like Chamberlain saying peace in our time. Kim of the Associated Press brings us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. The White House is asking lawmakers for nearly $56 billion in emergency spending to help the government respond to natural disasters, shore up funding for child care centers, and keep high-speed internet running for low-income families, outlining President Joe Biden's domestic priorities as Congress simultaneously weighs sending billions for conflicts abroad. The largest portion of the supplemental funding request sent to Capitol Hill yesterday, Wednesday, includes more than $23 billion for disaster relief as the Biden administration continues to aid communities across the U.S. devastated by wildfires, floods, hurricanes, and tornadoes. The package also includes $16 billion to help scores of child care centers to operate for another year, as well as $6 billion to extend free and discounted internet through December of 2024. Other asks include in the $56 billion request are international food aid, energy assistance for low-income households, and pay for federal wildland firefighters. Well, that brings us to our break. And when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world, and we will finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. We will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This is Scientific American's Science Quickly. I'm Karen Hopkin. What has one head, one foot, and one heck of an origin story? No, it's not a strange new superhero. It's a microscopic worm called a rotifer that was brought back to life after spending about 25,000 years locked in the Arctic permafrost. Its tale is told in the journal Current Biology.
This is a long-term topic for our lab.
Stas Malevin of the Institute of Physiochemical and Biological Problems in Social Science in Pushino, Russia. He and his colleagues have spent decades probing the Siberian permafrost, and they've managed to revive a variety of interesting organisms, from a plant seed and simple bacteria to scores of more sophisticated single-celled critters.
We have isolated around 30 or maybe 40 strains already of unicellular eukaryotes.
But for some reason, people weren't totally wowed by resurrected amoebas.
Yeah, they don't respect that. Rotifer is much better.
Rotifers are better, or at least more interesting, because they're multicellular animals with a head and a body that can eat, crawl around, and make more rotifers. And considering they're more or less teeny tiny worms, they're actually cute little guys.
They don't have guys. You know, they are all females. Yeah.
In fact, these little ladies reproduce asexually, laying eggs that hatch into the next generation of self-propagating rotifers. So they're easy to grow in the lab, although not as easy to gather in the lowlands of Siberia.
This place is relatively distant. First we go by 2 or 3 planes, then we go by boat or by helicopter.
Then they drill
1 or 2 or more boreholes. In older times, people used the first borehole as a fridge to store consequent cores in there.
Nowadays, portable freezers help them keep their samples chilled until they get them to the lab. There, Malevin and his team cut a small piece from the center of the core to prevent potential contamination with modern microbes. And then they pop it in a nice, warm petri dish.
This is called an enrichment cultivation in microbiology because those organisms are contorted, folded up, and we cannot see them even with microscope. So we need to wait until they reactivate from this cryptobiosis, come out from this permafrost piece, start moving, multiplying, and so on.
Not every sample yields success.
So usually we see nothing. It's a relatively rare event when something alive is isolated from this cause, which is also considered a kind of indirect proof that it's not a contamination, because if it was, every sample or maybe each second sample will yield some live organism. And here it's about 1 out of 20 or even more rare.
And in one sample collected in 2015, the researchers found this one little rotifer. They allowed it to reproduce and conducted some DNA analyses, which showed that although their frozen rotifer is similar to modern varieties, it's not exactly the same.
We consider it to be a new species to science.
And based on radiocarbon dating of other organic materials in the permafrost sample, they consider it to be between 20,000 and 30,000 years old.
That's approximate, but anyway, it's 2 orders of magnitude more, or maybe 3 orders of magnitude more than was known for cryptobiosis in those animals.
The previous record for frozen rotifers was a decade or so. But this gal, was around when woolly mammoths walked the planet. Now, the fact that rotifers can spring to life after a thaw is not a total surprise. Entering a state of cryptobiosis allows even modern rotifers to survive seasonal changes in their local environment and more otherworldly assaults.
They were actually sent into space, into open space, and they survived, and so on.
The next step is studying how rotifers can chill for millennia and still maintain their cellular integrity.
The main mechanism actually is the suspension of animation, the suspension of metabolism up to almost zero or maybe zero state. And so they don't need energy.
They also produce special proteins that act as antifreeze or that control the formation of ice crystals, findings that could someday enhance the preservation of human tissues.
That's why we are going to study proteins that help rotifers to survive in those conditions.
And when they figure it out,
maybe we cry, yeah, we did it, or something like that. Yeah.
For Scientific Americans, Science Quickly, I'm Karen Hopkins.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Welcome to A Cup of Health with CDC, a weekly feature of the MMWR, the Morbidity and Mortality Weekly Report. I'm Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser, filling in for your host, Dr. Kathleen Dooling. As the U.S. population ages, more people are at risk for injuries. The largest percentage of injury-related deaths among this group are caused by falls. Elizabeth Burns is with CDC's National Center for Injury Prevention and Control. She's joining us today to discuss ways to prevent injuries and deaths from falls among senior adults. Welcome to the show, Elizabeth.
Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, what are some of the more common consequences when a senior adult falls?
Well, first, it's important to note that falls are incredibly common. More than 1 in 4 older adults will fall in a given year. Common consequences include loss of independence and an increased fear of falling, as older adults are afraid to do the same kinds of activities they were doing before. And this can actually lead to more falls, as older adults have less strength in their lower body. Common consequences include hip fracture and traumatic brain injury. And ultimately, in 2016, almost 30,000 older adults died because of a fall.
So are falls more common in men or in women?
Falls are more common in women, and more women go to the emergency department because of a fall, and more women die because of a fall. However, the rate of fall deaths are more common in men than women. What this means is that out of 100,000 men, more will die from a fall than out of 100,000 women.
What are common causes of falls among older people?
Getting on and off the toilet and getting in and out of bed are common causes of falls. Walking around the hallways at night when the lights are off is a common way people fall. There's also an increased amount of medications used in seniors, which have side effects like making them lightheaded, and that increases the risk of falls and is a common cause.
With all of those factors, what are some ways our listeners can decrease their chances of falling?
Older adults should talk to their healthcare provider or doctor about how they can decrease their chances of falling. This can be done during the annual wellness visit or during annual physicals. The doctor will recommend an exercise program that should increase strength and balance or maybe refer you to a physical therapist. Additionally, they can look through your medications and perhaps reduce your doses or suggest medications that decrease your chances of falls.
Are there things we can do to modify our homes to prevent falling?
Oh, absolutely. Installing grab bars on the side of the toilet, making sure that rugs are taped down or removed, making sure that there's lighting in the hallways are all really simple ways that an older adult can modify their home to prevent falls.
Where can listeners go to get more information about preventing falls?
Listeners can go to cdc.gov/steady, and that's spelled STEADI.
Thanks, Elizabeth. I've been talking today with Elizabeth Burns about ways to prevent fall-related injuries and deaths among senior adults. Improving strength and agility through regular exercise and removing potential obstacles in the home can help decrease the risk for falls. If you or a loved one is older and struggle with mobility, talk with a healthcare provider about ways to decrease the risks for fall-related injuries and death. Until next time, be well. This is Dr. Jeffrey Nemhauser for A Cup of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
You're listening to the American Democracy Minute, keeping your government by and for the people. The U.S. government sent a diplomatic cable October 20th to over 100 countries, warning of Russia's efforts to disrupt elections, including amplifying disinformation like the Stop the Steal movement here in the U.S. The AP, Voice of America, and The Guardian report that recently declassified information shows Russia continues to use social media and websites to weaken democratic elections around the world. Those efforts attempted to undermine public confidence in 11 elections in 9 democracies between 2020 and 2022, and influence elections in 17 other countries. According to the cable, Russian tactics included using internet trolls and social media influencers to stir up suspicion and doubt about elections. U.S. officials suggest the success and low costs of interference efforts in the U.S. has encouraged Russian efforts to influence democratic elections elsewhere in the world. Russian operatives reportedly coordinated election official intimidation and an election day protest in one European country. A U.S. intelligence official interviewed by Voice of America said that Russians are, quote, amplifying existing domestic narratives, unquote, questioning the fairness of the election or that the election didn't work. U.S. recommendations to combat the interference included expelling the operatives responsible for the disinformation and expanding use of independent observers during elections. We have more at AmericanDemocracyMinute.org. I'm Brian Beal.
What happens if Trump's convicted? I'm Bill Newman, and this is the Civil Liberties Minute. The Constitution says that the qualifications for president are be 35 years old, a natural-born citizen, and a resident for 14 years. That's it. So, Donald Trump's eligible. An indictment or even a conviction doesn't change that. Any disqualifications? Well, perhaps Section 3 of the post-Civil War 14th Amendment that prohibits from holding further office an office holder who is engaged in insurrection or rebellion. Aha! January 6th, you might say. But Congress has not designated crimes that would disqualify someone under this section. And none of the crimes with which Trump is charged have disqualification from office as a penalty. Now, theoretically, because states control elections, a state election official could determine that the 14th Amendment does disqualify him from being on the ballot, in which case Trump would sue. Or, if on the ballot, someone else, another candidate perhaps, could sue, claiming that Trump should be disqualified. Such a case, whoever starts it, would sail the country into uncharted legal waters. And if Trump is elected president while he's in or on his way to jail, then what? Again, the Constitution doesn't prohibit him from taking office. And if in jail, Trump could sue to get out, claiming the judiciary can't interfere with his ability to do his job as president. The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU, because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1837. That was the day that Louisa Lee Schuyler was born in New York City. She was dedicated to the causes of public health and welfare, especially for the poor. This led her to help found the Bellevue Training School for Nurses in 1873. It was the first nurses' school in the United States based on the principles of Florence Nightingale, the English social reformer who established modern nursing practices. Louisa had become concerned with the conditions found at the city's public hospitals. Along with 3 other women, she toured Bellevue Hospital, finding poor lighting, dire sanitary conditions, and even a laundry that had run out of soap. The women wrote up a report about their findings. They made the case that a professionally trained nursing staff would help remedy the situation. The work of women during the Civil War had shown the potentially important role of nurses in providing medical care. The women's request was approved on a trial basis at Bellevue. Bellevue Hospital had opened its doors in 1736, making it the oldest continually running public hospital in the United States. The first class of nurses included just 6 women. Early training focused on improving sanitary conditions at the hospital and seeing to patient comfort. But instruction grew quickly to include basic medical training. By 1879, enrollment had grown to more than 60 trainees. Proud of their accomplishments, graduates wore a school pin. Designed by Tiffany & Company, the pin portrayed a crane in the middle of a wreath of poppies. The school operated for nearly a century, until the training program was incorporated into Hunter College. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2. Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin, whether from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River in the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon, on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 41 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting highs around the mid-50s maybe, mostly cloudy conditions throughout the day with a little bit of sun. Winds will be light and variable. We are under an active freeze watch for the next few days. We did dip down into the mid-30s last night, and we were expecting lows in the low 30s, upper 20s for the next few nights, hence the active freeze watch. Few clouds tonight, winds light and variable. Once again, lows in the low 30s. Mostly sunny tomorrow with highs once again in the mid-50s. Winds light and variable. Pollen is rated as none here in our little village of Rogue River. The air quality index for the region is in the good range at 26 parts per million, which means people will probably burn their trash and stink up the air, because they do that around here, darn it. Oh, but I will tell you that the daytime UV index is in the low range at level 2. Haven't seen that for quite some months. Barometric pressure is falling at 30.26 inches. Visibility is down to 6 miles, and relative humidity is at 91%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world, and that is the Weather Underground. The personal weather station right near downtown London is registering 60 degrees and mostly cloudy. Paris is at 58 degrees with light rain. Rome is 72 and partly cloudy with an active advisory for potential disruption due to thunderstorms and flash flooding. We're talking Rome. Bagram is 58 and partly cloudy. Kyiv is 55 and cloudy. Looks like, we now have to go to Beijing. They're not allowing us to have Hong Kong information now for some reason. Nonetheless, Beijing is at 77 degrees and fair. Tokyo is 63 and partly cloudy. Melbourne, Victoria, Australia is 54 and mostly cloudy. San Francisco, California is 51 degrees and sunny. Chicago, Illinois is 67 degrees and cloudy. And New York, New York is 68 degrees Fahrenheit and fair.
and that is weather from around the world, brought to you by a crowd of crowdsourced weather stations that a crowd crowdsources from around the world. Gerald Imre, working the world desk at the Associated Press, brings us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. The World Bank approved a $1 billion loan for South Africa yesterday, Wednesday, to help it address an energy crisis that has peaked this year with the country's worst electricity blackouts. The energy problem has forced the country to lean on its highly polluting coal-fired power stations. South Africa has experienced scheduled rolling blackouts for months because of problems generating enough electricity for its 62 million people. The state-run power utility, Eskom, generates approximately 80% of the country's electricity through its coal stations, but they have failed to meet demand due to mismanagement, corruption, and regular breakdowns. South Africa's commitment to its climate change targets are in danger of being affected in the short term, and that may delay shutting down some of its coal stations because of the electricity supply problems. While Africa contributes the least to climate change, is the continent affected the most. South Africa is Africa's most advanced economy, with the world's 16th largest emitter of greenhouse gases overall. It is 45th per capita based on 2019 data, according to Climate Watch. The South African government has said it needs nearly $80 billion over the next 5 years to fund its transition to greener energy sources.
Je te donne c'est mon amour pour la vie entière. La promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle. C'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer. Mes automnes, quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers.
Associated Press staff at the World Desk brings us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Slovakia's president is ready to swear in a new cabinet led by a former populist prime minister after a coalition partner agreed to replace its nominee for environment minister, who was known not for believing in the threat of climate change. President Zuzana Kapitova was set to appoint the new government on Wednesday yesterday. Kapitova, a liberal, last week said Rudolf Huliak, who was nominated by the ultra-nationalist and pro-Russian Slavic National Party, could not ensure the proper functioning of the Environment Ministry because he opposes the government's long-term environmental policy and Slovakia's international obligations. The Slovak National Party announced the nomination of Tomas Tabara instead. Tabara is also known for controversial statements about the environment. Huliak was the most controversial of the cabinet candidates presented to the president by former populist Prime Minister Robert Fico, whose leftist Schmear, or Direction Party, won the most seats in the September 30th parliamentary election. Fico's party won 42 seats in the 150-seat parliament after campaigning on a pro-Russian and anti-American platform. He has vowed to withdraw Slovakia's military support for Ukraine. He needed coalition partners to form a parliamentary majority and signed a deal with the leftist Hlas or Voice Party and the Slovak National Party to govern together. The deal gives Schmier the prime minister post and 6 other cabinet ministers, opening the way for Fico to serve as Slovakia's head of government for the 4th time. Hlas will have 7 cabinet ministers, while the Slovak National Party will have 3. Kapitova has been president since winning a 2019 election and will not run for the 2nd term next year. Oh my. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know Netroots Radio broadcasts on, and we will meet up here tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks. And we will meet up here tomorrow, right here, in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre, comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum. 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 Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver.